So right now we're having this kind of exciting time. There seems to be a lot of movement happening in the Middle East, movements towards democracy, movements towards voices happening, movement towards connecting through social media and networking and bringing people out to the streets to fight for their voice. We're calling it the Arab Spring. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's an exciting time, and to see kind of the notion of freedom and individual rights spread kind of virally, in a region that historically has been very, very tightly controlled. We saw this a generation ago in the Soviet Union. We've seen it in the past at various times in history. And I hope to see it, personally, I hope to see it happen in parts of Asia as well, because there's a lot of oppression going on there. But I think it's an exciting time.
So, Simba, you're right there in the middle of it. What's it feel like on a ground level?
I think that there's many different factors that have caused people to come to the streets to demand more than just democracy. I think it's demanding an end to, in a sense, dictatorships that have been supported by Western governments. So it's not something that's new. It's something that's been building up over time, and I think it's going to continue to gain momentum. And this is something that I remember an Egyptian said to me as we were speaking about what was happening during the revolutions. He says, but the Egyptians need to also change their own mentalities, their internal thought process. And I think that it is important that people in the West, all over, from Europe to the US, start to look at their own internal issues, start to look at not being drawn and taken away to what's happening outside the world, and look at poverty in their own country. I mean, in New York City, you have poverty that is a major issue, homelessness, which is a major issue, gentrification, which is a major issue. You have the U.S. government going out and giving U.S. aid to other countries when they can't even come to the rescue in terms of FEMA for natural disasters, like you saw in Hurricane Katrina. I think that there also, at some point, there will be a democratic uprising of the people in the U.S., in the West, where people will start to realize, no, we don't have, we've kind of been blindsided, where we've been made to believe that democracy is one thing, but the reality is that democracy is when you realize that you have the power, that the people are the majority, and that these politicians, corporations, these others are, in a sense, a small minority.
One of the things that keeps coming up when we talk about these movements is young people and social media, Is this a Facebook revolution? Is this real when we say this is a social network revolution? Like, how much truth is there to that?
I think when people, I think it's something that the West focuses on in terms of the social media aspect of the revolution. Social media basically came into play at a later stage, but in reality, a lot of these movements actually had been cooking and had been in the making for decades.
But I wonder sometimes if social media in other parts of the world, when it's used, in protests or in revolutions, if we're reporting on it only because it's being fed to us. And it makes me think back to previous generations, pre-internet kind of protests in parts of the world where English isn't the language, but when there's a protest, people hold up signs that say in English, dump the Shah, or all these things that are in English. It's not meant for the protesters there. It's meant for the American media, for the Western media, and it's getting our attention so that we can report on it. And I think we've kind of fallen into the trap of thinking, oh, this is, the social media, they're reporting on this, and they are. Social media is powerful. When things happen, when protests in Iran, in Egypt and Tunisia, you can go to Twitter and you can search a hashtag and you can see things in real time. But I always wonder if those all that coverage, so to speak, by citizens is not citizens necessarily talking to each other in that place, but citizens reporting on it for our benefit here in the West.
I think, the West does put a lot of emphasis on social media, but I think it's because there's not that much interest or it's not that much interest by journalists to basically report on the more core issues that need to be said. I mean, social media is basically a distraction. It's a distraction that is used to basically, make it seem like something that's interesting, a reality television show, rather than the reality of what's happening on the ground.
It sounds, though, actually like there's two sides to that there is that kind of sensationalized take on social media, but it also sounds from what you're saying, Simba, like there is a piece of it that is the great equalizer, that people do have access. They are posting their truths. When you post a photo from where you are, nobody can, take issue with that. They can say, this is really how it is, and that does contribute a voice. Are you finding that?
Just basically, instead of tweeting and posting things that are irrelevant, a lot of people use it to tweet, to share articles, to share ideas, to conversate about things that are important. Also, I think you have to understand that in a country where you can't go to the streets and publicly protest, social media does play this alternative role.
So Simba, I was curious, since you're there, and we've been talking about social media and kind of the sense of revolution in general, since the 60s in the United States, we have this kind of romanticized idea of revolution as something that young people lead. Is it an age-specific idea?
In the demonstrations that I went to, you could see people from many different kinds of ages. I mean, I saw one really amazing moment that I experienced, which was on the bridge, when it was around the time when Mubarak's National Party headquarters was being burned down. This old man drove up with his grandsons, got out of the car, they stopped the car, they got out of the car, the two grandsons came around to help the grandfather out of the car, and he started crying and dancing and rejoicing when he saw the building being set on fire, because he had lived through most of this type of repression, and I think that probably he thought that he would never see this in his lifetime. The protests in the beginning were organized through Facebook or through Twitter, and it was a few of the young people who had decided, okay, we're going to start demonstrations or marches in poor neighborhoods so that people actually see us visible on the ground. And this is how the Million Man March started to gain momentum once it reached Tahrir. You also saw, I went to many meetings of young people who had organized meetings to basically discuss revisions to the Constitution on their own, and they would bring in their grandparents, their elders, basically. They were going back to their elders, because of course this is where we get most of our wisdom. They went to their elders to ask for guidance, understanding what it was like to live under the regime for so long, what is happening today, to give them feedback as to where things can go forward and what lessons they had learned from the past. So I think it was very interesting in terms of Egypt. It was very interesting because to see this perspective, I'm very thankful.
But I think it's a really astute observation that it's something that the West is obsessed with right now, right? And so we want to find it everywhere. But one of the places that came up recently was with the announcement of the death of Osama bin Laden. So much of the images we see are people like this. And that's how they're getting the news. That's how they're finding out, right? So let's talk about his departure. What is the impact that's going to be having on these movements in the Middle East?
Well, I think it's too early to really know how it will affect. I was initially very nervous about the level of celebration we had in the U.S. because, to me, just killing, Osama bin Laden wasn't necessarily, the step that was going to win the war. And I think President Obama was very careful to say that this isn't going to end it. He wasn't putting out a banner behind him saying mission accomplished. So I think he was right to do that. But I say again that this is an exciting time, and whether it's American style, our vision of democracy, or homegrown style in other parts of the world, the fact that personal freedom is coming to the fore and becoming valued and pushing out oppressive regimes everywhere, I think that's a great thing, and I look forward to more of it.